Hello and welcome. Last week we considered the passage where Jesus reminded his anxious disciples that he is the way, the truth, and the life. That, even then, was a very countercultural message. But Jesus' final charge to his disciples was to take this very raw message, this very urgent message, into the world, his world. They were commanded to go and make disciples of all nations, to baptize them, to teach them all they had learned in 3 years from Jesus. And today, I'd like us to reflect on Acts chapter 17 from verse 16 to 31, where we see an example of this very bold attempt to evangelize by one of the earliest converts to Christianity, the great missionary, the Apostle Paul. And Paul takes this message right to the marketplace. The venue is first century city of Athens, which in Paul's days is in a period of decline as the intellectual center of the world, but still hanging on to its former glory. And the occasion grants Paul an opportunity to demonstrate that God is not only knowable, but that God also wants to be known. God is knowable, God also wants to be known. Two assertions which invite other huge, long-standing, even controversial questions in Christian philosophy. Can God really be known? If so, how? Others ask, why is God hidden from our naked eyes? Indeed, more recent arguments about this apparent hiddenness of God have been used as evidence against the very existence of God. Huge questions. Now, these were the same questions that Paul was grappling with every day in the local synagogue and marketplace in the city of Athens. And amongst his interlocutors are learned Greek philosophers who find his arguments quite bizarre, quite illogical. They contradict everything they had held as true. And for this, he earns himself an insult. They call him a babbler. They taunt him. Read Acts 17, verse 18. But just who are these people? One lot is called the Stoic philosophers, whose pantheistic view perceived the universe as the manifestation of God. For these guys, human beings ought to just live by reason, led by an acute sense of duty and self-sufficiency. The other group are called the Epicureans, for whom gods, as in gods with a small g, either did not exist, and if they did, they were far too flung away to be of any consequence to human beings. So human beings ought to be untroubled about the bigger questions of life and destiny. In common parlance, keep calm and carry on. That is what Paul was up against. It is therefore no wonder they liken Paul's reasoning to babbling. But to call Paul the Apostle a valueless idler with only a limited meaning, nothing could be more abusive for a man of Paul's exemplary education credentials. So then Paul begins his argument, and he tells them, people of Athens, I see that in every way you are very religious. For as I walked around and looked carefully at your objects of worship, I even found an altar with this inscription, to an unknown God. So you are ignorant of the very thing you worship. And this is what I am going to proclaim to you. And then Paul begins to unpack the whole mission of Jesus of Nazareth. that God, who made the heavens and the earth, does not live in shrines made by human hands, that God is the giver of life and breath to all things, that idolatry in all its forms is inexcusable, because all it does is to attempt to localize and confine and domesticate the creator of the universe into something we can touch and tame. It is our vain attempt to minimize the gap we feel between ourselves and God. And this is wrong. That is not possible with God. That is why these philosophers are ignorant of the very thing they worship. But Paul, alas, tells them God can be known through the resurrected Jesus by those who willingly repent and believe. That was Paul's message. And this final bit on the resurrection seemed to cast the dice for these Greek philosophers. The Bible tells us that some sneered and walked away, and some believed. Do you know, friends, the bodily resurrection of Jesus of Nazareth remains a stumbling block to the message of God. A God who reaches out to save humanity through a gruesome and shameful death on a cross is not very appealing to modern religious folk. But you know, extract the personhood of Jesus, his death, his resurrection, and you end up with something that is not Christianity. Then the bit about being religious, being religious was not only an issue in first century Athens. With its multiple and contextual meanings, being religious remains a contemporary and a prevalent fact that easily obscures the simple knowability of Jesus. Mark this though, being religious in that worldly sense is not necessarily synonymous with being a follower of Jesus Christ. Being a Christian is about being continually transformed by learning from the life and the death and the resurrection of Jesus, that real historical man who died and rose. The God we worship does indeed want to be known, and that remains our urgent message even today. It's our urgent message to all we encounter. So let's do it. Amen. See you next week.